Millions are going hungry in northern Nigeria in what the UN calls the most devastating food crisis in decades. 7 years of conflict with the armed group Boko Haram is being blamed, but what's being done to stop more people starving to death? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Folly Thibault. The UN is warning that 3 million people are at risk of starvation in northern Nigeria. 1.2 million more are affected in countries neighboring Lake Chad in what officials say is the most devastating food crisis in years. A 7-year conflict between regional military forces and the armed group Boko Haram has crippled food production and forced 2 million people to flee their homes. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris reports from Maiduguri, northeastern Nigeria, one of the hardest hit areas.
Amina Muhammad suddenly became a surrogate mother to her nephew Muhammad. The 4-month-old lost his mother to complications from severe malnutrition. Amina tries to breastfeed him, but she too needs nourishment. They were referred here only a few days ago.
There was hardly anything to eat in the camps, and we were not allowed to go out. I think that's what killed this boy's mother, and the father lost his mind. I am left to take care of him and 5 other siblings.
As bad as he looks, she says the boy's condition has improved. And there are dozens like him in this hospital, run by an aid agency.
It's quite a big one, and all of the people that are enrolled into the program are considered as severe acute malnutrition according to the global WHO criteria. The numbers we're seeing just keep skyrocketing.
Aisha is 6 months old. Doctors say the lesions on her frail body indicate how serious her condition is.
Some of these severely malnourished are brought here for specialized care, more than 100 of them. Doctors Without Borders staff who operate this facility say they receive more than 500 cases every day at another facility in Maiduguri. Thousands more are out there in camps, liberated towns and villages where food is scarce and getting there is risky.
The food crisis has already claimed hundreds of lives. Nigerian authorities have been accused of negligence and of concealing the scale of the problem. They say they are working hard to meet the desperate need and have launched investigations into how tons of food aid disappeared from camps across the northeast. But for the families who have lost their loved ones to this devastating crisis, that is no consolation. Amina is hopeful that young Muhammad will live, but her major concern if that happens is how a poor, displaced 54-year-old woman can look after him and 5 siblings. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Maiduguri, Nigeria.
Well, the UN has also been accused by some aid agencies of failing to act quickly enough to save lives in northern Nigeria. We put that allegation to Toby Lanza, the UN's regional humanitarian coordinator for the Sahel region.
I think over the past couple of years, the world has been really focusing and seized of the crises across Syria, across South Sudan, where I myself was working, or across Yemen. And it's difficult for all of us, whether we are a donor, a non-governmental organisation or a UN agency or a member of the public, to deal with so many crises which are afflicting people in different parts of the world. But the point is that the people here in the northeast of Nigeria need help and they can't wait any longer. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here today. It's one of the reasons that I've just listened to Falamata, who walked 50 kilometres to this camp to try to get a basic nutritional supplement that she can give her 7-month-old boy to keep that boy alive. And so are we going to stand with the people of Nigeria, with the children, with the boys and the girls across the Lake Chad Basin, or are we going to say, oh, sorry, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Yemen and South Sudan and other parts of the world is just too much for us to bear? We have to do better, whether we're an NGO, whether we're a UN agency, whether we are indeed a donor government.
Well, let's now bring in our guests. Joining us on Skype from Abuja, Nigeria's capital, Arian de Vet, Head of Nutrition at UNICEF Nigeria. In London, we have Kayode Ogundamisi, commentator on Nigerian affairs. And also in Abuja, Mike Ejiofor, security consultant and former director of Nigeria's State Security Service. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Thank you for being on Inside Story. Arian de Vet in Abuja, if I can start with you. You were very recently in Maiduguri. What is the scale of the humanitarian crisis there, and what's being done to alleviate the suffering?
Oh, thank you very much. Indeed, I was there 2 weeks ago for the last time for a monitoring visit. The situation, the scale is very bad. We estimate that this year about 240,000 children will have severe acute malnutrition. And severe acute malnutrition basically means that these children have, I call it basically skin over bone. These children are often at the brink of death. And we know that if no life-saving treatment is being provided, that almost 1 in 5 of these children are likely to die. So that is the challenge that we are all facing. Slowly we see that the response is slowly starting to come and rolling out. I'm just looking at some of the data. Well, in January we were able to reach about 3,000 children with severe acute malnutrition. In July we were already close to 7,000 children. So the number of children being reached is increasing, but it's still very far from the numbers of children that we know are out there. So still very much more needs to be done.
Right.
And in particular, you have to go into the communities to actively seek the children that need the support, because mothers often don't know where to go to find help. They do not have adequate access to services. So actively have to start screening the children and find those children that need the support, and then link them with the services that are increasingly out there. But as I said, you have to continue scaling up the response to get anywhere close to the level of needs that is out there.
Okay, Mike Ejiofor in Abuja, the crisis we're seeing right now unfold in northeastern Nigeria is, of course, a consequence of the war against Boko Haram. Hundreds of thousands of people have been trapped, cut off by Boko Haram, and they're being blamed for devastating food production, Mike. But obviously, I mean, the fighting, the kidnapping, but in what other ways is Boko Haram responsible?
Well, you see, the agriculture sector in that region has been adversely affected. There's no more production of, the people are engaged in farming, but now they cannot farm. And the federal government and the state government are making efforts to alleviate the sufferings of these internally displaced persons. And you also note that this is a consequence of the actions and activities of Boko Haram, which the government is also trying to fight. And I think once the war is won on Boko Haram and there's conducive environment, a lot of people will go back to farm, more so when the present government is laying emphasis on diversification of the economy, especially on agriculture.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the state of the conflict with Boko Haram right now. An estimated 20,000 people have been killed since 2009, and more than 2 million people have been displaced by the violence. Boko Haram pledged allegiance to ISIL in March of last year. Nigerian troops, with the help of regional allies, launched a counter-offensive later that year. President Buhari declared Boko Haram technically defeated in December, and although there have been recent reports about a split in the armed group's leadership, it still continues to launch attacks. So, Mike, I want to come back to you on this, because obviously you've followed this war against Boko Haram for a while now. I wonder, though, is defeating Boko Haram going to be enough to resolve this crisis in northern Nigeria? What other actions should the Nigerian government be engaging in?
Well, you see, defeating Boko Haram in northern Nigeria might not necessarily end the crisis, because, like you rightly pointed out, the Boko Haram, the local content of Boko Haram in Nigeria, had earlier pledged allegiance to ISIS, so they are collaborating with ISIS. And now there's a division in Boko Haram, ISIS imposing another leadership against the Shekau. So this becomes a problem, a very big challenge that government has to contend with. So it calls for extra vigilance on the part of the military and our intelligence services to work out modalities to see how government can deal decisively with this action, because it becomes very difficult while government is making efforts at negotiating, especially on the release of the Chibok girls, which is paramount and one of the front burner. The Boko Haram is still launching attacks against some installations, especially in the distribution of food, like you rightly pointed out before. Some United Nations workers were attacked recently. So it's a big challenge that government has to attend to.
Kayode Ogundamisi in London, the blame is solely being laid on Boko Haram, but there are also those who say that the Nigerian military and its allies in this war against Boko Haram have been responding to Boko Haram with a scorched earth policy in northeastern Nigeria, and hence this food crisis that we're seeing today. What are your thoughts on this? Does the Nigerian government and its army also bear responsibility?
I think that it's quite easy to blame Boko Haram for everything that is going wrong in northern Nigeria. But the fact of the matter is this government indeed made progress in recapturing territories from Boko Haram. And they did acknowledge the success. But what what is not being told is the fact that Boko Haram still has its operational headquarters in Sambisa Forest, which is a part of the territory of Nigeria. They have their command control structure. And the reality of on ground is that we've not been able to penetrate Sambisa Forest. And so long as you don't cut off the head of the snake, it's still able to strike. On the food crisis, look, the fact is corruption is key in the deprivation of the IDPs. I visited Maiduguri last year, and we did warn the Nigerian government that the amount of stealing, the amount of rebagging of foods meant to vulnerable people that is going on in Maiduguri and Northeast Nigeria
Who is stealing
is going
this
to lead
food,
into malnutrition.
Kayode Ogundamisi? Who is stealing the food aid? A lot of it has disappeared, of course. Who is to blame for that?
You have people, there's so much bureaucracy. You have people who are meant to take care of the IDPs, who rebag these materials and then sell them in the marketplaces. You have food that are donated by international agencies, and you can easily bag them. Look, let's be clear, Northeast Nigeria, there's abject poverty. So when you tell a woman who is hardly able to feed her children at home to go and take care of food amenities for IDPs, she's forced to actually steal some of those food and take it home. So there's a need for increased security to dismantle the bureaucracy so that international donors can go directly to the people who need them and distribute food right to them. Until that is done, we're just going to be beating around the bush. It is clear that the issue of not being able to farm is there, but what happens to the tons of food that is being donated to these IDPs? Millions of dollars donated by international agencies are just getting stolen, and nobody's
let's put that to Mike Ejiofor in Abuja. Mike, what's happening to the food aid? Where is it going?
Well, I'm not aware. I just read in the papers that food from donor agencies are being diverted. And I believe that the Borno State government, who is at the center of it, should be able to investigate. And I think I remember the governor mentioning that he has ordered investigation into the allegations that food were being diverted. Until that is done and the report is made public, people are hungry, and there's the possibility of people actually diverting food and selling to make ends meet because of the harsh economic condition cannot be ruled out.
Okay, let me bring in Arian once again from Abuja. Arian, 3 states in northeastern Nigeria worst hit by the insurgency have been under a state of emergency for a number of years now. I wonder, how does that factor in all this, in the food crisis that we're seeing? How is it difficult for you to access the people most affected by the crisis, to reach people in need and distribute food if these states are under a state of emergency?
Yes, thank you very much. I think in most of the states, particularly Yobe and Adamawa, access is now very well, and the programs are running quite well. Access is not much of a problem. There's still several parts of Borno where access is very limited or completely absent. As you know, there's some areas that were newly accessible in Borno, where we've been able to go since April, but the roads are not still completely safe. There was quite recently an attack on an UN convoy. We still continue the support in those areas, but there are still several other areas in the state where we can completely not go. we estimate that about 2.2 million people who are still in those areas that are completely inaccessible. And as UNICEF, we're very, very concerned about their situation. But if you allow me, I want to bring in one additional factor, because we talk about the factor that is contributing to the food and nutrition crisis. And I believe probably the biggest factor there is the very chronic food insecurity and malnutrition. If you look in the whole of Nigeria, we estimate that this year about 2.5 million children are severely malnourished. And it means that about 1 in 5 are likely to die. So if nothing happens, if no support is provided, about 500,000 children this year in Nigeria are likely to die of severe malnutrition.
What needs to happen precisely, Arian? You say something needs to happen. I wonder what needs to happen. Is it a question of resources? Is it a question of getting the money to get aid to people, or are there other factors also at play here?
No, there are different factors. I think that generally we have to start scaling up the response. You need more health workers. You need more resources to get the adequate supplies available. We need more training. And particularly in Borno, we need to start getting access to some of the areas that are still accessible or inaccessible, so where we can't go at all. But as I also mentioned earlier, we need to also look even beyond the Free States, because in the whole northern part of the country, there's this continuing chronic crisis of severe acute malnutrition. That's really the background that has caused this problem, made worse by the presence of the Boko Haram crisis.
Okay, let me bring in Kayode Ogundamisi in London once again. Kayode, the Nigerian army has said it's defeated Boko Haram, technically defeated Boko Haram, and it's began clearing many of these areas in northeastern Nigeria. But at the same time, the authorities are being accused of maintaining tight control over humanitarian and also media access in northeastern Nigeria, and accused basically of deliberate negligence and attempting to conceal the scale of this crisis. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it is quite known that the government, the Nigerian military, they've made significant progress in striking Boko Haram and keeping them out of quite a large local government. But the narrative that is being told that the Nigerian government wants the world to know is to state that everything is easy and dandy, that everything is all right. That is not true. The story of the Chibok girl is actually a very clear example. That for many months, the government will keep quiet about the Chibok girls until Boko Haram gets to release videos, and then the government will come out to say they have a strategy to liberate the girls. And this is 2 years going. A very clear example is this recent video. Instead of the government to go after Boko Haram, they're going after journalists and negotiators who are actually looking at the alternative means of discussing with Boko Haram elements and getting these girls released. So the government came in on a very strong security campaign that they were going to keep the country safe. But what they're also not telling Nigeria is that, look, the capacity of the Nigerian military has not increased significantly. It's just the bravery and the doggedness of the few military elements in the army. When they liberate a local government, they move on. Boko Haram will come back to the local government because you don't have a community police that will take over and protect. You don't have the civil police, civil security. So Boko Haram is just a round door where insecurity now pervades. So we need to increase the capacity of our military, increase, even if it means massively recruiting more people into the military to be able to sustain the gains against Boko Haram.
Okay, but Kayode Ogundamisi, can the military alone, can the Nigerian military alone defeat Boko Haram? Isn't economic development also needed to stop extremism?
We've said it over time again that, look, the increase in Boko Haram's greatest recruiting machinery is poverty. For as long as there's that poor young lady, poor man within the community, look, let me give you an example. Recently, some of the elements within the Nigerian IDP camps were saying their lives were better under Boko Haram, that at least they had something to eat. That is how bad it is. So they were willing to go back to Sambisa if given the opportunity. Okay. So you need to actually take care of the economic crisis within that part of the country and in Nigeria in general. So it's quite huge that the economic crisis should be tackled.
Okay, well, let's ask Mike in Abuja his thoughts on this particular point. Mike, in your opinion, what needs to change in Nigeria to deal with this crisis, the food crisis in northern Nigeria? What should the government be doing short-term and long-term?
Well, we need, first of all, to win the war on Boko Haram. And like Ogundamisi said there, these people still have their operational basis, and you don't expect that the war will just end completely. They still have the operational basis, no doubt. And the government on Israel is intensifying effort. You can see the new chief of army staff is always in the front, so the tactics have changed. And that's responsible for the gains we've made so far. And we need to consolidate. There's no way we can consolidate without getting the civil authority, like the police and the civil defense, for them to occupy the place and assure the people that the area has been secured. As long as this is not done, people will not be encouraged to come back. And that's the problem the government is facing. And I think with like we said earlier, with the factionalization, because what is very, very paramount in this fight against terrorism, like the present government has said, unless these girls are recovered, the war will not be seen to have been won. And with the video just released and the factionalization in Boko Haram, ISIS imposing leadership on Boko Haram and the local content of Boko Haram, it becomes a big problem that governments need to identify very credible people to negotiate with and see how this war can end.
Okay, well, let's come back to the most urgent crisis right now, and that is the food situation, the food security situation in northeastern Nigeria. And bring in Arian once again. Arian, as you've said, this food crisis is not just about Boko Haram. There are other factors also at play here. Factors like global warming also. We've seen Lake Chad disappearing as well, and that's having an impact on the food situation. Do you think this problem is ever going to be resolved, and what do you think the long-term plan for the region should be to address this?
No, definitely there are other factors. I mean, if you look at some of the major underlying causes of the high levels of malnutrition in the northern part of the country, of course, poverty is always there. I think a more important factor is actually the knowledge of the people, a simple knowledge on the importance of breastfeeding, but also the importance of and knowledge on how do you prepare a nutritious meal for a very young child from 6 months onward. How can you use the locally available foods? Even if you're poor, you might still have access to nutritious foods. How can you prepare it in the best possible way that the child can get the best nutrients out of it? A traditional meal is often a very thin porridge which provides water but not necessarily the nutrients.
Okay.
And then, of course, also dealing with issues like gender. We see that a lot of women get a first pregnancy at a very, very young age, when they're often adolescents themselves. They're not fully grown themselves. And we know that an adolescent pregnant woman is very likely also to get a malnourished child. And actually we see that malnutrition among adolescent girls is high. So if an adolescent girl gets pregnant, the likelihood that she's getting a malnourished baby is very, very high. So these are some of the underlying factors that we will have to deal with as well.
Okay.
I think that can change? Definitely. If you look at some of the trend data over the last 25 years, we see that also in Nigeria, malnutrition rates have gone down somewhat, from about 50% 25 years ago to about 33% last year. So there is progress. We just need to ensure that the northern part of the country benefits from the progress as much as well.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Arian de Vet, Kayode Ogundamisi, and Mike Ejiofor. Thank you all for being on Inside Story. And thank you for watching. You can always watch this program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter, of course. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Folly, Thibault, and the whole team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.